Trump White House has called for a review of all current and future exhibitions at 8 Smithsonian museums. This has got some of the major art museums involved as well. And this is because of, quote, a desire, or the quote starts with, alignment with American ideals, a desire to make sure they're aligned with American ideals. President Trump truthed the following: the museums throughout Washington, but all over the country, are essentially the last remaining segment of woke. And then the White House released a list of museum exhibits that it found objectionable. Trump has told his lawyers to go through museums, and this is the same thing to do with colleges and universities. His administration has sought changes threatening funding cuts and even tax-exempt status. So the left is, of course, very upset about this. And the reason they're very upset about this is that they want these institutions to reflect their view. Right? Remember, there's no neutral space here. They want these to reflect their view of American history, which means highlighting oppressed and victimized people, and more specifically, highlighting the centerpiece of American history until the Industrial Revolution, Clay. And the one and only thing that we're allowed to really think a lot about is slavery. And that is the single central, most important to highlight aspect of American history, according to some of these museums. And there's a fight underway, and I think this is a good thing. I think that Trump should not allow the left-wing nonsense to go without pushback at this. A traveling exhibition at the museum, at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art in Arizona, Clay, was called Transfeminisms. This says, and now they have changed. So we're talking about some pretty radical left-wing stuff at museums in general, but at our National Museum, Smithsonian Museum specifically.
Here's a couple of headlines for you, for yours truly, after the take that I'm about to share with you. Fox News pundit compares slavery to plane crashes in absurd rant against the Smithsonian. Some of you may have seen this, by the way, seen the actual event going on. Yahoo Sports with Regular with a similar take, saying not a substantial part of history. The Fox News pundit compares slavery to plane crashes. Let's see. Yahoo says Fox News pundit compares slavery to plane crashes, an absurd rant against the Smithsonian. Yahoo. All right, here's what I said, and I bet you're going to sign off on this too. Maybe some of you disagree. I said, citing my trip to the Air and Space Museum with my 17-year-old, I said that when you go to the Air and Space Museum, it is about the incredible human accomplishment of flight and space exploration. We went through that whole place. Spirit of St. Louis hanging from the ceiling. So many different, the Wright brothers plane from Kitty Hawk is there, recreated, the original, one of the original versions. We spent an entire day there. It was awesome. We went to the IMAX theater. We watched the movies that they were putting on there. One about some of the challenges of space and time. The other about the challenges associated, if I remember correctly, with interstellar travel. Right? I mean, it is sci-fi. It is history of flight and space exploration. There wasn't a single exhibit about plane crashes or about people who died trying to go to space. That doesn't mean that plane crashes don't happen all the time and that there aren't dangers from aviation and space travel. And maybe at some point in time, they have a special exhibit for the Challenger, or they have a special exhibit maybe connected to 9/11 in some way. I don't know if they've ever done that. But in general, I think the goal of the Smithsonian's is to make people feel better about America and American life and to leave with an uplifting feeling. Now, there are other museums in Washington, D.C. that are directly related to specific forms of trauma. The Holocaust Museum, for instance. But by and large, to me, sites like the Air and Space Museum should not be places where you go and examine human failure and the wrongs that have been perpetrated that have led to lack of success in space travel or flight. To me, that's a very, I think, easy to understand and also normal emotional response that most people would have. And so Trump is focused on the achievement, and much of the left now is focused on American failure. And that's really what this conversation is about.
Now, the administration highlighted a number of specific exhibits. I was looking for this a second ago, but I found it. I can go through just a few of these. So there was a exhibit on LGBTQ plus history at the American History Museum. LGBTQ plus.
I would not sign off on that in the American History Museum personally. Like, I don't think that is necessary.
Well, I mean, the history of LGBTQ plus has got to go back only a couple of years because they just came up with that acronym a few years ago. I mean, the plus was just added, so this is very new. This is really contemporary, not actually history. And then you had, this is the one I think got the most attention from people, a painting of immigrants crossing the southern border at the National Portrait Gallery. So it's a very favorable depiction of an immigrant family and, a baby that, like, I mean, it looks like the baby Jesus or something that is crossing Trump's wall. And they didn't, they don't like that. By the way, that's illegal. What they're doing is a crime. So it's interesting the way it's depicted. It's actually illegal, but the way it's depicted, it's like a great, leap forward in America's history or its past, whatever. Anyway, there's a bunch of other ones. Latinos with disabilities, a drawing of Anthony Fauci at the National Portrait Gallery. Fauci's a scumbag, so that's not good. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this stuff is all very political. Imagine if you had at the National Portrait Gallery, they were putting up, they're putting up paintings of, like, what a terrible dementia patient Biden was and having him look really confused. I mean, you might say that's a great painting, Buck. I should do that. But people would recognize that it's very partisan, Clay. These are very partisan things that are going up in these museums.
Yeah. And again, I think the idea is, and I think most of you would sign off on this, one reason that Democrats' popularity is in the tank is because they focus on the failures of America almost exclusively. They've got the oppression Olympics all the time, the idea that you cannot succeed, that America's a horribly racist, irredeemable country with a sordid past. I mean, really, the entire concept of the 1619 Project, which the New York Times got behind, among others. Nicole Hannah-Jones, I believe, was the history. I'm putting in quotation marks because she's not actually much of a historian. But the idea of the 1619 Project was America's founding date is actually when slavery began in the colonies, and not 1776 when America declared independence from Great Britain. And so if you root American history and define it entirely based on slavery, then you are able, this is the goal, to tear down anything that was created in that era as illegitimate and oppressive. So the Constitution doesn't have to exist. The Declaration of Independence can be removed. All of that can be torn down if you decide to only focus on the sins of American history. What I would say is 600,000 some odd people died to end slavery. That seems pretty significant in the general American consciousness. We should focus and celebrate successes over failures. I think that's what our museum should do.
Yeah, if you're talking about combat fatalities in the Civil War, overwhelmingly, it was white men who died on both sides, but white men who died on both sides, and it was their price in blood that ended the institution of slavery. Which that always seems to get left out of this.
Yes.
That always seems to be left out of the conversation. And there's a hatred, I think, of Americanness that the left indulges and really wants to propagate. And we see it at the universities, and now we see it we saw it with the 1619 Project, the New York Times, and now we see it through the institutions of museums. And enough is enough. Let me ask you this, Clay. What other country would do this? Find me another country. I mean, the only thing you could maybe think of would be, German museums about Nazism, or the way that Nazis are treated in German museums of World War II. But this idea that you're going to have museums that seek within a country that seek to attack and undermine the country from within. This is not a common thing that the rest of the world would engage in.
I think that's true. And I also believe that what Trump sees is the symbolism of tearing down statues isn't really about those individuals who are having their statues torn down. It's an argument that the story of American history is one of tragedy and one that we should be saddened by and embarrassed by. And I think most of you out there that are students of history recognize that all of us are flawed, but that what we want to do is celebrate the great moments of American triumph while acknowledging that we don't always make the right decisions. The long-range history of America from its inception in 1776 to the present day is one of the greatest country in the history of the world, struggling, fighting, endeavoring to become greater than it has been in the past. And that's why I think Make America Great Again has such a cultural resonance, because it's about making us all better than we have been in the past, and also returning us to some of the principles that made us so foundationally dominant. And it would make sense that you would then examine history to see what our kids are being taught. Because if they're being taught that America is a profoundly racist, awful, oppressive country, then it's hard to have pride in the country. And guess what? Young people don't have a lot of pride in the country. And when you don't have pride in place, you're able to be led astray, and you're able to reject the history of this country and all of the accomplishments of so many people out there before us. And I think that's what Trump gets innately. Look, college campuses filling up again, nearly 20 million college kids going away this fall. If you've got a kid going off to college, how about give them some self-protection? And I'm talking about what Sabre can provide. These are self-protection tools we recommend in your own home, but also for your kids or your grandkids if they're going off to school. Pepper sprays, pepper gels, projectile devices. These are fantastic to have. We've got a 17-year-old who's now driving his own car. He's got pepper spray that he keeps right in the center of the car so that he could use it if he needs to. Do you have a daughter? Do you have a granddaughter going off to school? Is she having to walk into a parking garage? Is she having to walk? Maybe she has night classes. Maybe she's got a job. Maybe she's going back and forth. What protection does she have? This is what Sabre's all about. It's a company founded by a family, still run by that family, that can help make your own family that much safer. And right now you can save 15% on the Sabre Mega Bundle with extra projectiles, magazines, and practice targets. If you go to sabreradio.com, that's SABRE radio.com. You can also call them 844-824-SAFE. That's 844-824-SAFE. And you will get hooked up. Go check them out. I promise you're going to love the products. We've got them all. Buck's got them all. You and your family could definitely use these. 15% off, sabreradio.com. That's SABRE radio.com.